November 19th, 2016. With their backs against the wall in Death Valley, the Gators make a goal line stand for the ages. The Southeastern Football Conference is not in the business of canceling games. Therefore, not many folks took the time to familiarize themselves with a little-known rule in the commissioner's regulations, which stated that in order to be eligible to appear in an SEC title game, a team must complete each of their 8 scheduled SEC contests. Strange rules are built for strange times, and in 2016, LSU and a hurricane named Matthew created strange times for both Florida and the SEC.
Thank you, Mac. As you said, I'd like to read a statement here and then answer your questions. It has been a long week dealing with the aftermath of postponing this game, but our week pales in comparison to the families of those who lost their lives, their homes, their jobs, or who were impacted in any way due to Hurricane Matthew. Our sincere thoughts and prayers are with those so impacted. The realities of their situation hopefully allows some perspective. After all, we're talking about a game. However, we recognize the importance of the game to the Southeastern Conference and the respective schools, fan bases. And as we've indicated from day one, we would actively work with the SEC and LSU to reschedule the game, understanding the entire situation was not perfect. As the week progressed, however, it became abundantly clear this was going to be a difficult negotiation. LSU had drawn a line in the sand and was simply refusing to consider any other options presented except those consistent with the line they had drawn.
Not all that different from a husband arguing with his wife. It became abundantly clear that this was going to be a difficult negotiation. She had drawn a line in the sand and was refusing to consider any other options presented except those consistent with the line she had drawn. Foley was not exaggerating.
I know there's a lot of speculation about scheduling of this Florida football game. I've been in contact with Commissioner Sankey over the weekend, and what I said the other day about this being very difficult to reschedule is still true. I think it's very difficult. One thing that we're going to hold very firm on is that we have a home game November 19th, and we're going to have a home game on November 19th. We are going to have a home game on November 19th. We are not going to change that situation.
Florida and LSU were originally scheduled to play on Saturday, October 8th, but it was abundantly clear that Hurricane Matthew was going to have an impact as early as Tuesday that week. Matthew, then classified as a Category 4, made landfall in eastern Cuba and Haiti.
With Nicole Mitchell. She's in the Weather Center with the models just coming in. Nicole.
Good evening. And as we continue to watch this is a very strong Category 4 storm. You can just pick out the eye near Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. This has already crossed over a portion of Haiti. But in terms of the track, by almost cutting this gap, that is favorable for it to not lose that intensity. Had it passed more over Hispaniola, there's mountains on the Haiti side up to 8,000 feet. In the Dominican Republic up to 10,000 feet. That would have shredded this storm apart. But by staying mostly over the water, it's caused not only a lot of damage, but the water keeps it with that intensity. It's kind of what helps feed it. And it's also not gotten that drier air by going over land or the mountains. So winds right now at 140 miles per hour, movement at 9, and it's 65 miles off of Guantanamo, Cuba right now. But we're very concerned also as to where this will be going, because already by Thursday, still possibly as a Category 4 just off the coast of Florida. And in fact, that cone of uncertainty, because these can shift a little bit, does actually bring this potentially toward Florida. So something that we're going to have to monitor toward the weekend as it continues up the coastline, possibly losing a little bit of that intensity, but definitely a lot of rain, wind, and that potential landfall again for the United States as we head into the weekend.
As Aliva pushed for solutions that included LSU flying into Gainesville to play the game on Sunday or providing transportation and lodging for Florida to come to Baton Rouge, Florida began to prepare for a landfall on the East Coast, which is about 70 miles away from Gainesville. While Hurricane Matthew crossed the Bahamas with winds topping 145 miles per hour, the SEC released a statement that the game would be postponed. The LSU Florida football game scheduled for Saturday in Gainesville has been postponed due to Hurricane Matthew, it was announced Thursday. The universities and the SEC office will work to reschedule the game later in the 2016 season if possible. We had a very productive phone call today with a great spirit of cooperation between the university's presidents and athletic directors, and it became clear that the University of Florida can neither host nor travel to a game this weekend considering the circumstances, said SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. The developments of the hurricane in the last 24 hours, the projected magnitude of its impact, and the unknown aftermath of this storm have resulted in this decision to seek another date to play the LSU Florida game. We have to be sensitive to the possible imminent disruption to the state of Florida and in particular the Gainesville and surrounding area.
We are going to have a home game on November 19th.
At this time, the schools do not have a common open date on which to reschedule the game, so the schools in the SEC office will make every effort to find a scheduling solution with the possible movement of other games on the school schedules.
We are going to have a home game on November 19th.
The timing of this storm on a Friday and the uncertainty of its aftermath in the ensuing days make it particularly difficult to project the conditions for the remainder of the weekend, as well as the opportunity for travel of teams and fans to or from Gainesville and other cities in Florida, Sankey said. I am appreciative of the cooperation of our universities on this matter.
We are going to have a home game on November 19th.
A source confirmed to SB Nation that LSU offered to hold the game in Baton Rouge, but Florida Athletic Director Jeremy Foley suggested it wasn't practical for Florida to move an entire football team to Louisiana on a day and a half's notice. He noted that Florida players and staff have families who are bracing for the hurricane. To reschedule, LSU and Florida might need to get out of other games. The big issue facing both of these teams, they didn't share a bye week for the rest of the year. They did, however, have non-conference home games on the schedule for Saturday, November 19th. LSU against South Alabama and Florida against Presbyterian.
More than 3 million people have been told to evacuate. This storm will most likely be the most devastating hurricane to hit Jacksonville, Florida in 118 years. World News Tonight anchor David Muir is there leading our coverage on the Florida coastline. Good morning to you, David.
Amy, good morning to you. And as you heard Ginger say, just as we're on the air with Good Morning America this morning, the western edge of that eye wall is now brushing land near Cape Canaveral. Of course, the concern there was the Kennedy Space Center. And as it moves northward, this is the area right here in Jacksonville where they say the biggest threat is the storm surge. They're concerned about it really up and down the coast and all the way up through the Carolinas. But it's right here where I'm standing where they're expecting up to 11 feet. We're going to show you the dangers on the map of that in a moment. But first here this morning, the pictures coming into this hurricane already. Hurricane Matthew slamming into Central Florida's coastline.
Unfortunately, this is going to kill people.
With wind gusts up to 115 miles per hour.
It's kind of almost a whiteout condition out there.
The hurricane eye just a few miles now off Cape Canaveral. At least 10 inches of rain expected.
You can see the water out here. It's blanketed by this rain now.
As over 300,000 are without power at this hour. These transformers exploding in Vero Beach. Matthew's path changing plans in this popular vacation state, even forcing Disney World to close its gates for only the 4th time ever in the park's 45-year history. Cruise ships docked and thousands of travelers stranded, with airports emptied and more than 3,800 flights already canceled here in the U.S. More than 3 million Americans now fleeing their homes from Florida up to North Carolina. FEMA officials preparing to provide relief, with states of emergency now declared in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. The hurricane already devastating the Caribbean, running its path through the Bahamas, its force ripping the roof right from this home. And in Haiti, a nation in crisis, at least 122 dead. The Coast Guard now providing a clearer picture of home after home leveled. Good evening. As we come on the air tonight from Jacksonville, Florida, and as you can see, Hurricane Matthew is churning right off the coast, right here in Jacksonville as we begin tonight. And right here behind me, that storm surge they've been talking about, this is St. John's River here in Jacksonville. You can see the water almost up to the sidewalk here. They were worried about this surge, and it is underway as we're here tonight. In the meantime, take a look at the other images coming in right now. Also right here in Jacksonville, you can see the water there breaching the shore, rushing into the streets, already flooding homes at this hour. The western side of the eye wall first touching Central Florida, Daytona Beach, battered at dawn. In St. Augustine, the storm surge, the water's rising, families stranded, staying inside this inn. Those powerful waves eroding the beach, ripping away this historic highway along Palm Coast. And to give you an idea of just how close we are to Matthew right now, just take a look at the radar at this hour. Spinning right off Jacksonville, Georgia and South Carolina in harm's way tonight. In a moment, we are going to take you right up in the air with the hurricane hunters flying through Matthew right now. You will see images right from the cockpit. But we begin tonight with ABC's Eva Pilgrim in St. Augustine in the middle of this storm.
Tonight, deadly Hurricane Matthew pummeling the Central Florida coastline, already claiming at least 4 lives.
You can see just how bad it has gotten here.
From the roof, ocean water breaching dunes and taking over these Jacksonville streets. And on the ground, inside the Jacksonville Baptist Medical Center, hospital staff rushing 21 newborns out of the NICU to safety. Overnight, torrential downpours and wind whipping stoplights, thrashing palm trees, submerging cars on the road. You can see the water out here. It's blanketed by this rain now. Power lines exploding and breaking under the wind, leaving more than 1 million without power.
You can see it also took down some power lines. Those power lines are down all the way down the street here.
Here in St. Augustine, Florida, devastating flooding.
You can see how strong the winds are and the rain. The water's actually coming over the storm wall there, and we're not even on the beach.
This is still a really dangerous hurricane, that the potential for storm surge, flooding, loss of life, and severe property damage continues to exist.
David, this is still a very active situation. As you can see, this water is very much still high at this hour.
First, my thoughts and prayers go out to all the people in Florida. Here in Louisiana, we know what it's like to go through hurricanes and floods and natural disasters, so our prayers go out to all the people in Florida and our hopes that they're safe and make it through this hurricane well. I just want our fans to know and everyone to know that LSU made every attempt to try to play this game. We offered to go to Gainesville on Sunday. We offered to fly in there Sunday morning, play the game and fly back Sunday night. We offered the opportunity for them to come here Saturday or Sunday to play the game. We made every opportunity to play it. Ultimately, the decision was made by the league office, and we respect that. You have to respect safety. You have to respect Florida's concern about safety and travel. So, at the end of the day, though, we're very disappointed. We wanted to play the game. Our players wanted to play the game. I personally wanted to play the game, and that's kind of where we are right now.
It was clear that Florida held some frustrations toward LSU in this process. Instead of being a reasonable partner in negotiations, the Tigers made the sole focal point about not losing another home game.
I've been part of this league for 40 years, with the last 25 as athletic director of Florida. Through the years, I have been part of a number of difficult conversations that we discussed as a family. Like all such conversations, there were differences, but behind closed doors, we were able to get to a good place as a league that is very special to the University of Florida and very special to so many people. However, after a conference call yesterday between both schools, it was apparent that the only option that allowed this league to escape a very hard reality and move forward with our season was a concession made by Florida, and that was to play this year's game in Baton Rouge and next year's in Gainesville. Coach McElwain is totally supportive of our decision. There were a lot of moving parts to this decision, and Commissioner Sankey was the key in all of them coming together for Florida. He worked tirelessly to make this all work. We recognize fully this decision will not be accepted by all. We ask for your trust and understanding. It is the right one for the university and this conference. The league is a family, and sometimes members of the family have to make a decision that is in the best long-term interest of the family. This is what makes this conference great, in my opinion. Working together has always been a part of the culture of this league, and it must continue. Hopefully time can heal any wounds that exist. It usually does.
Perhaps Oliva was still bothered by the fact that LSU had to cancel the 2015 home opener against McNeese State due to inclement weather and did not want to endure another season of lost home revenue. Perhaps Oliva was concerned with the prospect of ending the regular season with 3 straight conference road games if the Tigers were to travel to Gainesville on November 19th. Or perhaps Oliva was just an ass. One can only speculate. In an effort to please Joe Oliva and LSU's desire to not miss a single home game, the SEC felt it was best to accommodate that request by taking yet another home game away from the Florida Gators. Florida opened the season cruising by UMass, Kentucky, and North Texas by a combined total of 101-14 for an early 3-0 start. Despite bursting out to a 21-0 lead on Rocky Top, a disastrous second half snapped an 11-game win streak and a 38-28 loss to Tennessee. The next week, the Gators logged a sluggish 13-6 victory over Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I'm sure that this was probably the last thing that you were concerned about this weekend, but there was a lot of criticism from some prominent national media members about how this was handled and specifically attacking your organization and even suggesting that you guys were trying to dodge this game. What was your reaction to some of that?
19 deaths, 2.5 million devastated without power, families in dire needs. Obviously, they don't know me. They don't know the Florida Gators. They don't know our players. Dodging a game? Wow. I obviously those people, man, I obviously growing up in Montana, I've never been through a hurricane, okay? But I think a lot of people around here have and have seen the devastation. And, you know, it was certainly, how anybody could even think that way is beyond me.
A big win over Mizzou preceded a dominant defensive effort against Georgia. Kirby Smart's first team only managed to gain 164 total yards in a 24-10 Gator victory that sent the Bulldogs to 4-4 on the season. But, in line with the main theme of the McElwain era, just when it looked like the Gators were gaining momentum, the bottom fell out. Florida went on the road and could only manage 12 rushing yards against a Brett Bielema-led Arkansas team that had previously given up 45 points to Texas A&M, 49 to Alabama, and were fresh off of a 56-3 beatdown at the hands of Auburn in the week prior to the Gators. Florida did manage to bounce back the next week and move to 7-2 heading into the LSU game. Despite disappointing loss to the Volunteers and Razorbacks, the Gators were just one win away from clinching their first back-to-back SEC East titles since the days of Tebow. The Gators' offense had their issues, but the Gators' defense was stout. In Florida's 7 wins leading up to the LSU game, the Gators' defense had only given up an average of 7.29 points per game. Entering into the 2016 season, the Les Miles era was hanging on by a thread in Baton Rouge thanks to the rise of Saban and the Tide. LSU had not won the SEC West since 2011, and even then, the Tigers were shut out by Saban's Tide in a national championship rematch. LSU was ranked 5th in the preseason polls and had high hopes heading into 2016 thanks to the return of running back sensation Leonard Fournette, who was coming off of a sophomore season which yielded 1,953 rushing yards and 22 touchdowns on the ground. However, those hopes were quickly abandoned with an opening day 16-14 defeat in Lambeau Field against Wisconsin. The Tigers would go on to top Jacksonville State handily and Mississippi State by a field goal before falling in another offensively challenged outing, this time 18-13 against Auburn, to leave LSU a disappointing 2-2 at the end of September. Things had reached a boiling point and Miles was fired on the Sunday after the Auburn loss.
Listen, it's never easy when you make a change, especially when a change involves a man like Les Miles. I felt, however, that this program needed a change. And the change was necessary to give the players the best opportunity to succeed. I felt that at this time, Ed Orgeron is the right man to take over this program. His enthusiasm is contagious. He has outstanding leadership characteristics, and I still believe this team has great things ahead of it. And there are great things that can be achieved in the last 8 games.
In addition to Miles, the school had also announced that offensive coordinator Cam Cameron would be relieved of his duties and that defensive line coach Ed Orgeron, a La Rose, Louisiana native, would take over in the interim capacity. Orgeron had successfully guided a struggling USC team to a 6-2 finish in 2013 after Lane Kiffin had been fired. Additionally, Coach O had head coaching experience in the SEC, leading the Red Bull Field charge at Ole Miss between 2005 and 2007. Quarterback coach Steve Ensminger was appointed to run the offense, and LSU began to light up the scoreboard. After averaging 21 points through their first 4 games, LSU went 4-1 in the 5 games heading into the Florida game, averaging just under 41 points per game in those 4 wins. Defensively, the Tigers were just as good, allowing a little over 11 points per game during that same stretch. The lone loss, a 10-0 home shutout, and a hard-fought loss to number 1 Alabama, a team that would eventually go on to lose in the final seconds of the national championship game against Clemson. Though the Gators had the better record at 7-2, they were seen as the beneficiaries of a soft schedule, and LSU was a considerable 13.5-point home favorite for the Saturday afternoon showdown in Tiger Stadium. Both teams were banged up late in the season, but perhaps the most notable injury concern centered around that of the left ankle of star LSU running back Leonard Fournette. Fournette's status was in doubt on the day, and it appeared that he was not going to play. According to ESPN, Fournette was dressed in sweats and a baseball cap and was watching his teammates warm up when the shoving match broke out following an argument between freshman cornerback Chauncey Gardner from Florida and Savion Smith from LSU. Fournette was among the participants in the scuffle, twice shoving Florida defensive backs coach Torian Gray before the groups were separated. Multiple reports had indicated that Fournette would be out against Florida, but interim LSU head coach Ed Orgeron confirmed after the game that Fournette came to him in the locker room after this incident and asked to play. LSU running back Darius Geis was busy early, capping off their 12-play, 80-yard opening drive with a 1-yard touchdown run. The Gators answered right away with an extended 11-play drive of their own, but had to settle for a field goal to cut the lead to 7-3. It appeared the defenses were about to have a long day when the Tigers marched right back down the field, going 63 yards and setting up a 1st and goal from the Florida 7-yard line. But the Gators defense shut down the LSU threat by jumping on a Geis fumble in the backfield to cut a promising drive short for the Bayou Bengals. The offenses went into hibernation for the rest of the first half, trading 5 punts and combining for a single first down. LSU 7, Florida 3 at halftime. LSU worked its way down the field to open the second half thanks to an 18-yard completion from Etling to tight end Colin Jeter on the first play and a 33-yard leaping reception by Malachi Dupree along the sideline despite good coverage from Florida corner Tease Tabor. Leonard Fournette led the Tigers down inside the Gators' 5-yard line, and LSU was sitting pretty, facing a 2nd and goal from the Florida 3-yard line when the Gators' defense dug in again. Etling lined up under center in an offset I formation, turned for a play action to Fournette, and rolled right with the clear intention of hitting Fournette in the end zone for a short completion. But a Florida defender knocked Fournette off course, and as the star LSU running back struggled to regain his balance, Etling was running out of real estate and decided to make a run for the pylon. Etling beat the defensive end around the corner, and just as it appeared he was going to make it into the end zone, Florida linebacker Vosean Joseph released his coverage, stepped up, and sent Etling flying out of bounds with the type of hit that would have made Dick Butkus proud. On the next play, Fournette was dropped in the backfield by defensive lineman Caleb Brantley, forcing LSU to settle for a field goal attempt from the Florida 2-yard line. LSU punter Josh Groden bobbled the snap, panicked, picked up the ball, drifted back, and launched a high fadeaway pass from near the 20-yard line that fell harmlessly to the gold-painted end zone in Tiger Stadium. Another Tigers possession inside the Florida 10-yard line, and 0 points to show for it. To add insult to injury for LSU, on the following play, the Florida offense, which had posted back-to-back 3-and-outs to end the first half, stepped onto the field, and Austin Appleby connected with freshman wide receiver Tyree Cleveland for a 98-yard touchdown after Cleveland beat LSU cornerback Dante Jackson down the right sideline, made an over-the-shoulder grab around the LSU 35-yard line, shook off Jackson, and took it the distance to put Florida on top 10-7. Around LSU, they know the play as that 98-yard touchdown we surrendered to Austin Appleby. But around Gator Nation, we know it as only the second most famous reception of Tyree Cleveland's career. Still trailing 10-7, LSU mounted a drive early in the fourth quarter that had them set up with a 1st and goal at the Gators' 4-yard line. On first down, Geis plunged up the middle for 2 yards, and just as it felt like LSU was about to turn its luck around inside the Florida 10, Gators defensive lineman C.C. Jefferson beat his man and blindsided Etling, sacking the Tigers quarterback for a 9-yard loss on 2nd down. Etling managed to complete a pass down to the Florida 5 on 3rd and goal, but the Gators made an easy tackle and forced LSU to settle for a field goal to knot things up at 10-10 with 12:18 remaining in the contest. LSU only had 3 points to show for its last 3 trips inside the Florida 10-yard line. On the following possession, Florida did its best impersonation of LSU with a sustained 15-play, 75-yard drive behind hard runs from both Jordan Scarlett and LaMichael Pirine. But like LSU, Florida could not punch it in despite being set up with a 1st and goal from the LSU 4-yard line. On 3rd down from the 1, Appleby threw an errant left-handed pitch behind Pirine. The Gators jumped on the ball, but had to settle for an Eddie Pinheiro field goal to take a 13-10 lead with 4:37 remaining in the game. On the ensuing kickoff, a short directional kick threw off the timing of the LSU kick return team's blocking assignments, and Dante Jackson, the same corner who had been beaten by Cleveland down the sideline, bumped into his teammate fullback J.D. Moore while crossing the LSU 20 and lost the football. Florida linebacker Vosean Joseph jumped on the ball and gave the Gators prime-time field position at the LSU 21-yard line with the chance to put the game away. 3 straight runs bled the clock inside of 3.5 minutes, but Florida gained only 5 yards as McElwain seemed content to tack on another Pinheiro field goal and increase the lead to 16-10. LSU struck quickly on its final drive. Consecutive big runs, a 13-yarder from Etling followed by a 14-yard gain by Geis, put the Tigers in Florida territory with just under 3 minutes left. 2 plays later, the Gators caught a break when LSU wide receiver Russell Gage dropped a wide-open pass around the Florida 30-yard line. An errant Etling pass on 3rd down set up 4th and 10 from the UF 48-yard line. Etling lined up in shotgun with 4 wide, took the snap, and hit future NFL wide receiver DJ Chark. Did somebody say Shark? No, coach. Nobody said Shark.
Ding, ding.
Chark was wide open because the corner who was covering him had slipped and fell, allowing him to catch it in stride and race down to the Florida 18-yard line for a 30-yard gain and an LSU first down. The Tigers were in business with 1:53 remaining. 2 plays later, LSU was set up with its worst fear. Another first and goal inside the Florida 10-yard line, this time at the Florida 7. McElwain called for a timeout following an opening 2-yard run from Geis to stop the clock at the 30-second mark. On 2nd and goal from the 5, Geis appeared to slip through a hole on the right side of the line, but the Florida defenders held on for dear life, stopping the star LSU back just shy of the goal line, forcing the Tigers to call a timeout with just 24 seconds left in the game. On 3rd and goal from the Florida 1-yard line, the Tigers tried to catch the Gators off guard with a quick handoff to fullback J.D. Moore, but the junior from Ruston, Louisiana could not create any forward momentum and was stood up on the 1-yard line thanks to the chaos induced by the Florida defensive line. Etling signaled for another timeout, and after about a month of back and forth between these two schools, the game would be settled on one final play on this sunny afternoon in the heart of Death Valley. In the age of the spread formation, it's not often that football fans are treated to one final play of smash mouth football that will decide a winner and a loser. Mano-a-mano football featuring a rivalry that had been just as heated off the field as it was in between the lines. When both teams got back onto the field, all 22 players came out lined up inside of about a 20-foot box from the outside edge of the right hash mark to about the halfway point between both hash marks. Not a single player in either orange and blue or gold and purple was lined up wider than either the golden S or U inside the purple end zone of Tiger Stadium. LSU lined up with 2 tight ends with their hands on the ground flanking each tackle. A H-back lined up 2 yards behind the offensive front, just to the outside of the left side tight end, and Darius Geis was behind Moore in an I formation. Geis, great player and all, very good player at LSU, but where was Leonard Fournette? His ankle was good enough to fight before the game, but the LSU legend was not on the field when the Tigers needed him most. In fact, he had not been seen since Caleb Brantley put little Lenny down for the afternoon on a similar goal-to-go situation in the 3rd quarter. Lenny didn't get it done earlier, so who's to say his presence would have made any difference in this situation? Etling jabbed his left foot to signal a quick motion from the H-back, who motioned a couple of steps from the left toward the center of the formation before heading back to the left side and settling in behind the left tackle. As the ball was snapped, the Florida defensive front formed an orange wall as Etling pitched the ball to Geis. It was a slow developing pitch play. Etling appeared to expect to pitch back to the right, but Geis had started to move forward to Etling's left, causing the LSU quarterback to briefly adjust and make the pitch while awkwardly sliding out of the way. Geis caught the ball around the 5-yard line with no one around, cut back toward the middle of the field, and built up momentum for one final crack at the end zone. As Geis planted his right foot just inside the 3-yard line, he leapt over the sea of humanity, but just as it appeared that he was going to cross the goal line, Florida defensive back Marcel Harris ran through a blocking attempt from the fullback, wrapped up around the airborne Geis's legs, and with a little help from defensive linemen Jordan Sherritt, CeCe Jefferson, and Taven Bryan, the Gators shut the door on the up-and-over attempt, coming up with a goal line stand for the ages to clinch a 16-10 victory in the SEC East crown.
One of the great victories in recent Florida Gator history, outmanned and on the road, and they come away with a 16-10 triumph and head back to Atlanta to meet the Alabama Crimson Tide. And let's go down to Kaylee with Coach McElwain.
Coach, how do you describe these emotions?
How about that? That was all right, wasn't it? Just these guys were beat to heck. Came on the road for a home game and won the SEC East. Didn't we?
You did.
Pretty cool, isn't it?
a test of wills there, right there at the 1 yard line. How does that sum up the will this team has?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they got some guts. I mean, they got some pride. They were called out. And you know what amazes me is people call people out when there's actually tragedy happening. It's unbelievable to me. And you know what? We came on the road and won a game. It's the way it should be. Look, it's a ball game. The incident that happened back then, there were lives involved. This is a ball game. And you know what? Gators came out on top, and I think we're going to Atlanta, right? It's no small feat to go to that championship game back-to-back. I think that's what we're doing, which is pretty cool. And I just can't tell you how proud I am of our players, our staff, and happy for the Gator fans, you know, that, don't think we're very good, but all we do is end up back in Atlanta, right? So that's pretty cool. But the other way we kind of looked at it was this was actually supposed to be a home game. So the way we talked about it was we'll end the season undefeated in the Swamp. And we're 6-0 in the Swamp this year. That's pretty cool.
Rivalries are a part of what makes college football great, and the 2016 Florida LSU game added to the lore of an old SEC matchup, which had kicked up a gear since LSU's rise to national prominence in the early 2000s. Jim McElwain's Gators often left us wanting for more, but on this November Saturday, in a game which LSU strong-armed their way into playing at home in Baton Rouge, Florida stood tall when it mattered most, and neath the orange and blue victorious, the champions of the SEC East left the field and traveled back home from a trip they never should have had to make in the first place.
Coach, how satisfied are you that you guys won this game, considering all the rhetoric that was coming out of here 4 or 5 weeks ago about you guys trying to duck LSU?
Yeah, can you believe that? I mean, it just shocks me that somebody would question the Gators. And the way I look at it, they got what they deserved. And it should have been worse. You know, it's amazing what at like 12:30 in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, some of the names you can come up with for stuff. It's actually pretty cool. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Aren't you guys glad you came? Yeah, good.